The Bing, a survival guide to Rikers Solitary Confinement. First you stop counting minutes, then you stop counting hours, then you stop trusting your own voice. Welcome to the Bing, Rikers Island's name for solitary confinement. 8 by 10 feet of concrete, 1 slot in the door, 1 steel toilet, 1 light that never turns off. Here, noise becomes language, silence becomes violence, and time itself stops cooperating. You are about to learn the rules of a place that has none. A place where the only way to stay human is to act like something less. This is not a documentary about Rikers solitary confinement. This is your survival guide. At Rikers Island, punishment doesn't end with incarceration. It deepens. When order breaks down, a fight, a threat, a rumor, you're sent to the Bing, the Department of Corrections Special Housing Unit. Officially, it's administrative segregation. Unofficially, it's the state's laboratory for testing how long a person can stay sane without human contact. The Bing was built not to discipline but to deter, to convince the human brain that disobedience leads to disappearance. You will hear men shouting through walls to remember they exist. You will smell mold and blood and bleach in equal measure. You will see nothing that changes, and that is the point. This guide will not comfort you. It will explain you how you break, how you adapt, and how the institution survives your survival. You don't plan on coming to the Bing. Nobody does. You arrive because someone said you fought, or you looked at a CO too long, or you refused an order that didn't make sense. At Rikers, disciplinary tickets are the currency of control. Officers write them to reassert authority, to move a problem out of sight, or to preempt retaliation. If you collect 3 in a week, you're flagged for enhanced supervision. 1 more and you're in the Bing. There is no trial, no defense. Just a brief hearing before a captain who reads from a form already filled in. 30-day special housing, he says. He doesn't look at you. He's reading a forecast, not a sentence. The Bing is built like an inverted mirror. Every corridor identical, every door labeled with numbers that mean nothing. The cell is 8 feet by 10 feet. You get a steel bunk, a plastic mattress, a toilet sink combo, and a fluorescent light that hums at 120 Hz. The walls are painted institutional beige, a color designed by psychologists to suppress emotion. Air vents pump recycled air that smells faintly of disinfectant and sweat. Temperature fluctuates without warning, freezing at night, humid by noon. The sound design is deliberate. You hear everything except freedom. Distant shouts echoing through pipes. Doors slamming 3 tiers away. The metallic rhythm of a mop bucket rolling down concrete. It becomes a chorus of mechanical routine, the soundscape of control. Every detail is optimized to remind you, this space belongs to the state, not you. Never shout first. The microphones pick up everything. The wrong noise brings the team, shields, pepper spray, restraint chair. Never show weakness to the door. Officers watch for emotional tells, pacing, crying, mumbling. Each is logged under mental instability. Never refuse the tray. Refusing food triggers an incident report, which resets your disciplinary clock. Hunger is rebellion, and rebellion extends your stay. Never count the days. You'll lose the count before you lose your mind. The moment you stop tracking time, time stops tracking you. The Bing is designed to eliminate feedback. In normal life, you act and see reaction. A look, a sound, a change. Here you act and nothing happens. You shout, no answer. You knock, no reply. You move, no response. The absence of feedback rewires your brain. Psychologists call it learned dissociation. You call it going hollow. Men in the Bing describe their minds splitting. 1 part pacing, 1 part watching from above. It's not madness. It's adaptation. The only law here is sensory starvation. And the only cure is self-invention. Rikers introduced solitary confinement in 1982, following a surge of inmate assaults. At first, isolation cells were disciplinary, 24-hour lockdowns for violence. But by 1994, the system expanded under behavioral management. The Bing became a warehouse for anyone labeled disruptive, regardless of offense. By 2013, over 1,200 people were in isolation at Rikers, many for minor infractions like talking back or refusing to clean. A Department of Justice report that year called it a systemic violation of human rights under color of discipline. The DOC's internal nickname, the Bing, comes from Old Street slang, meaning the hole, the pit. It spread through the jail like folklore. If general population was the city, the Bing was exile. Before reforms, teenagers were routinely placed in solitary. Khalif Browder spent over 700 days in isolation here before his release. He was 16 when he entered. In 2014, the Board of Correction banned solitary for inmates under 18. But enforcement was loose. Instead of solitary, they called it enhanced restraint. Same cell. Different paperwork. Same silence. The Bing is not one place, it's a network of them. At Rikers, every facility has its own version. OBCC, Otis Bantam Correctional Center, the original SHU, pure sensory deprivation. GRVC, George R. Vierno Center houses extended duration units, up to 180 days. MKC, Anna M. Cross Center Medical Administrative Bing for mentally ill detainees. Each unit operates like a microstate with its own culture. But all share one unspoken constitution: total compliance through isolation. There's no commissary in the Bing. You can't buy snacks or soap. Everything comes through the slot in the door. If you're lucky, another inmate in the tier above might fish you a note, a thread of twisted bedsheet used to trade paper, food, or messages. Fishing is illegal, but it's also survival. It's the only form of commerce left, an economy of string and patience. When officers catch a line, they confiscate it. They call it contraband. You call it connection. There isn't one. Officially, you're allowed 1 hour of recreation a day, in a caged yard no larger than a cell. Unofficially, that hour may never come. Meals arrive irregularly. Breakfast between 4 o'clock and 5 a.m. Lunch mid-afternoon. Dinner sometimes before sunset, sometimes near midnight. You eat not because you're hungry, but because time demands a ritual. Food is the only clock you can trust. The rest of the day blurs into noise and stillness, a rhythm that breaks the human circadian instinct. Rule 1. Don't wait for help. The mental health counselor will appear once a week, if at all. He'll ask if you're suicidal. If you say yes, you'll be stripped naked and placed in a suicide smock. If you say no, he'll move on. Rule 2. Create order where none exists. Count floor tiles. Recite books you remember. Memorize the sounds of the doors. Each small repetition becomes a scaffold for sanity. Rule 3. Protect your imagination. It's the only thing the DOC can't confiscate. Once imagination decays, the walls become infinite. Officers assigned to the Bing are a specific breed, selected for discipline and consistency. They rotate shifts to prevent familiarity. They're told not to speak with inmates beyond direct orders. But they watch everything. They record every twitch, every reaction. Their notes become your future. The more you resist, the more data they collect to justify your confinement. Defiance feeds documentation. Documentation feeds duration. It's a loop. Resistance becomes reason. You're trapped in a bureaucratic feedback system engineered to treat rebellion as diagnosis. Every empire of cruelty needs a logic. The DOC's logic is simple: solitary keeps everyone safe. Reports and policy papers call it protective management. Administrators claim it's temporary, targeted, humane. But oversight audits tell another story. Average duration, 90 days. Longest recorded stay, 1,452 days. Average mental health deterioration rate, measurable within 72 hours. In a 2018 Department of Investigation report, a DOC psychologist admitted, there is no therapeutic benefit to isolation. Its function is compliance, not rehabilitation. Around the 10th day you start hearing the building breathe. Pipes creak. Vents hiss. Water runs through distant walls. You start timing them, imagining patterns, decoding them like Morse code. This is your brain manufacturing meaning. It's called pattern hallucination. If you last longer than 3 weeks, you begin conversing with yourself aloud, not from madness but from neurological necessity. Speech becomes feedback. Feedback keeps your neural circuits alive. Those who stop speaking altogether often begin losing speech coherence within a month. Your mind is a muscle. It atrophies from disuse. What breaks people in the Bing isn't pain. It's stillness. No matter how much you sleep, you never feel rested. No matter how much you eat, you never feel full. No matter how long you think, the thoughts don't end. Every moment becomes identical. Every sensation repeats until it erases itself. That's the point. The Bing doesn't just punish you. It unteaches you how to be human. Why does it persist? Because it works, not at reform but at administrative peace. Solitary makes difficult inmates invisible. It reduces paperwork. It gives the illusion of order to a system built on chaos. Every hour you spend in silence is one less complaint, one less lawsuit, one less riot. You are the lubricant of bureaucracy, suffering converted into smooth operation. The Bing's success is measured not by who survives, but by how quietly they do it. You won't have a watch. You won't see daylight. Time inside the Bing isn't measured, it's imposed. To survive, you create artificial time. You'll learn the guards' rotations by ear, the rattle of keys, the cough of a specific officer, the squeak of a certain boot. You'll measure the distance between meals by smell, the synthetic margarine of breakfast, the reconstituted tomato of lunch, the chemical meat of dinner. Eventually you'll learn to feel the hours through sound decay. Morning, constant clanging of doors. Afternoon, muffled conversations. Night, the long hum of nothing. You must replace the clock with rhythm, repetition so precise it tricks your brain into continuity. If you lose rhythm, you lose reality. Physical stillness breeds hallucination. Your muscles will forget what movement feels like. Your joints will stiffen until even sitting feels foreign. So you invent structure. Push-ups in sets of 10. Sit-ups against the steel bunk. Pacing, 12 steps from wall to wall, pivot 12 steps back. Count them. Make them sacred. Physical exhaustion is the closest thing to sleep. Researchers from Columbia's Neuroscience of Confinement Project, 2019, found that controlled repetitive exercise lowers psychosis onset by 40% during solitary confinement. Your heart rate becomes your protest. Communication keeps you alive. The system knows this, that's why it isolates. But you're not powerless. You'll learn the knock code. 1 knock equals A. 2 equals B. Long pause equals space. You'll fish notes under doors with dental floss lines. You'll trade poems, recipes, prayers, coded acts of rebellion. Language isn't luxury here, it's survival. When the Bing silences you, you become your own civilization. Every message sent and received becomes proof that thought still circulates in the void. The brain loves pattern. Deprived of stimuli, it begins recycling memories like broken film reels. You'll relive your arrest, your worst fight, your last conversation thousands of times. These are cognitive loops, the mental equivalent of pacing. To break them, you introduce deliberate absurdity. Sing nursery rhymes backward. Recite movie dialogue out of order. Count prime numbers until your head hurts. This is not madness, it's neurological maintenance. Clinical studies from the Journal of Correctional Psychology, 2020, show that pattern interruption preserves executive function under extreme isolation. The key is confusion, controlled chaos to prevent total collapse. The cell door is your interface with power. Behind it are the COs, your only contact with the external system. Understand their rhythm. There's the watcher who stares without speaking. The joker who provokes. The phantom who says nothing and moves like air. They rotate shifts, but their patterns reveal the bureaucracy's pulse. When they grow chatty, there's an inspection coming. When they're silent, something happened. A suicide, a riot, a cover-up. Reading the door is reading the institution itself. Never show need. Never beg. Need is leverage. Begging marks you for sport. You can't control their cruelty, but you can map it, and mapping is power. The light will not turn off. The hum will not stop. The smell will not fade. Sleep deprivation becomes its own form of control. After 5 nights, your brain loses track of circadian rhythm. After 10, it begins generating intrusive imagery, flashes of color, movement, phantom sounds. You'll see figures where there are none. You'll hear voices that sound like memory. To resist, you must create sensory rituals. Cover your eyes with your shirt during night. Time breaths to 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Touch the wall once every 10 minutes to anchor yourself in space. The body becomes its own map of sanity. A 2018 American Psychiatric Association report found 47% of long-term solitary inmates develop sensory misperception that mimics schizophrenia. But many survive by using microgrounding techniques, turning confinement into meditation, agony into arithmetic. Outright rebellion is suicide. But resistance still exists, in subtler forms. You can refuse to speak during counts. You can place your tray back through the slot in perfect silence. You can move in slow, deliberate patterns that make officers uneasy, the stillness of defiance. In the Bing, rebellion is measured not in violence but composure. Every calm reaction undermines their theory of your instability. The quiet inmate is dangerous. He forces the institution to confront itself. They will try to erase you by repetition. Each day identical, each hour unrecorded, until even you doubt what happened. Document everything, even if only in your head. Catalog the order of meals, the pattern of footsteps, the date of your last hearing. When you leave, that memory becomes evidence. Human rights investigators rely on testimonies of sequence, the mental logs of survivors whose brains became archives. Remembering is rebellion. If you forget, the Bing wins twice. once by isolating you, again by deleting you. It takes 20 days for measurable cognitive impairment to appear in solitary confinement. By 45 days, most subjects exhibit anxiety, hallucination, and impulse control loss. By 60 days, irreversible neural atrophy begins in the prefrontal cortex, the part that regulates empathy. You can't stop the damage. You can only redirect it. When rage hits, turn it into math. When despair hits, turn it into pacing. When tears hit, let them, they lubricate the machine. Every emotion here is data, evidence that your mind still resists becoming architecture. There's no warning system for violence in the Bing, but there are patterns. When the hall goes silent for too long, it means something's brewing. When a guard lingers at your window without speaking, brace yourself. When the air smells faintly of pepper spray, it means someone else already lost control. Learn to read the weather of violence. You can't fight it, but you can anticipate it. Inmates who survive longest aren't the strongest. They're the ones who treat chaos like climate, something to be forecast, not resisted. Everything in the Bing moves through one portal, the slot in the steel door. Food trays, letters, punishment. You'll start measuring your day by the slot's sound, the clang when it opens, the silence when it closes. At first you'll hate it. Later you'll worship it. It's the only variable in a room designed for constants. Some inmates develop compulsive slot rituals, whispering to it, tapping it, polishing it with toilet paper. Psychologists call it object displacement, the redirection of social energy toward inanimate design. But in truth, it's theology. When the state becomes your god, the slot is its mouth. There will be moments you convince yourself someone will intervene. That an appeal, a lawyer, a judge, or a reporter will notice. Don't. The system feeds on hope as much as fear. Every postponed hearing, every unanswered grievance is a psychological test. If you cling too tightly, the waiting becomes torture. Hope must be rationed like air. Too little and you suffocate. Too much and you hyperventilate. Use it sparingly. You can't defeat the room. You can only understand it. Every screw placement, every light hum, every echo is intentional. The Bing is a behavioral algorithm rendered in steel. Its purpose isn't to harm you, it's to calibrate you. To find the point where fear becomes obedience. Knowing that doesn't make it easier. It makes it survivable. Knowledge becomes insulation, the understanding that pain has design. Once you see the system as architecture, not morality, you regain control over how it defines you. Sanity here doesn't mean logic or composure. It means continuity of self. If you can still recognize the person inside your mind as the one who entered the cell, you've won. Even if he whispers. Even if he cries. The goal isn't to stay unchanged, it's to ensure the transformation remains yours, not theirs. Every story of survival from the Bing ends with that same sentence. I came out different, but it was me who decided how. Eventually the slot will open wider. A CO will read your name. You'll be escorted out, blinking at artificial daylight. Freedom won't feel real. You'll flinch at noise. You'll crave walls. The air will feel too wide to trust. That's not weakness, it's neurological residue. Your body learned that isolation equals safety. Reentry feels like exposure. You'll think about the Bing long after you leave it. Because in truth it doesn't let anyone go. The Bing's genius isn't confinement, it's replication. It teaches you to build smaller versions of it inside yourself. Every quiet room, every long night, every unanswered message will echo with that same hum. That's the final rule. Once you know the Bing, you never fully leave it. When the door finally opens, light hits you like violence. The corridor seems impossibly bright, voices too sharp, air too cold. Your pupils contract, your ears pulse. The body isn't celebrating freedom, it's defending itself. You've lived inside a controlled ecosystem for so long that open space feels unsafe. Neuroscientists call it spatial threat conditioning. Your nervous system, having adapted to 8 by 10 feet, now interprets openness as chaos. You'll crave corners. You'll seek boundaries. The very thing that once imprisoned you will now comfort you. Every survivor of the Bing carries that imprint. A map of confinement etched into muscle memory. Even outside you'll find your mind returning to the Bing, involuntarily. You'll still count footsteps, trace cracks in walls, stare too long at patterns. Psychologists working with former Rikers inmates call it cell lag. The cognitive delay between physical release and mental recognition of freedom. For some, it never ends. One former detainee told the New York City Board of Correction in 2019, "The cell's still in my head. When I lie down, I still hear the slot." That's not metaphor. That's trauma coded into rhythm. Solitary confinement doesn't just change what you fear. It changes what you recognize as real. When you leave the Bing, you return to the same neighborhood that sent you there, Hunts Point, Brownsville, East New York, the South Bronx. But you're not the same person. And the neighborhood isn't designed to receive you. Rikers feeds its trauma back into the city. Blocks once policed for crime become landscapes of untreated psychological injury. Former inmates describe flinching at subway doors, mistrusting silence in apartments, craving institutional noise. The DOC calls it recidivism. Anthropologists call it institutional imprinting. The Bing doesn't reform, it exports. Its logic of isolation seeps into public life, in policing, in poverty, in architecture. The island's silence echoes across the boroughs. Every system that practices solitary confinement develops a moral blind spot, a zone where suffering becomes invisible because it's procedural. At Rikers, solitary isn't an exception. It's an instrument. It smooths chaos into bureaucracy. City officials describe it in percentages and policy papers: reduced usage by 28%, enhanced monitoring protocols. But what's being measured is degrees of despair. In 2021, the New York City Board of Correction voted to end punitive segregation. The Department of Correction renamed it instead RMAS, Risk Management Accountability System. New paperwork. Same cell. The language changed. The suffering didn't. The Bing solves one problem for every layer of power. For officers, it removes threats. For administrators, it hides statistics. For politicians, it signals control. For the public, it creates distance from guilt. Isolation becomes the state's most elegant drug. It produces order without visible violence. You can stand in City Hall and believe reform is happening because the screams are too far away to hear. But the human cost compounds quietly. Every broken mind is a deferred debt the city will one day pay, in welfare, in homelessness, in homicide rates. The Bing keeps order inside Rikers by exporting chaos outside it. The Department of Justice has audited Rikers' use of solitary confinement 5 times since 1998. Every report reads like déjà vu. 1998, excessive and routine use of isolation in lieu of treatment. 2009, solitary applied beyond reasonable disciplinary need. 2014, widespread use on mentally ill detainees. 2019, administrative rebranding with no substantive reform. 2023, continuation of sensory deprivation under alternative titles. Between 2010 and 2023, the average daily solitary population fluctuated between 400 and 1,000 people. The average sentence, 60 to 120 days. Over half were pretrial detainees, legally innocent. Each statistic is a life paused mid-sentence. It costs the city approximately $438,000 per inmate per year to maintain solitary confinement units at Rikers. That's more than a Columbia University tuition, more than a luxury Manhattan apartment. And yet, those cells produce nothing. No rehabilitation, no education, no future employability. Economists call this a negative investment. You spend to destroy value. One city budget analyst once described it to The Intercept as paying premium rent to store ghosts. The Bing doesn't just consume human beings. It consumes money, trust, and the moral legitimacy of a system that calls itself correctional. The Bing changes officers too. Exposure to constant silence and tension warps their psychology. A 2020 Department of Investigation report found COs assigned to solitary units had triple the PTSD rate of officers in general population. They began displaying the same symptoms as the inmates: hypervigilance, emotional numbing, insomnia. The Bing is contagious. It converts keepers and kept into co-prisoners of a system that dehumanizes both. The guards call it the ghost shift. They clock out but never really leave. Every few years, a commission announces reform. A new mayor promises closure, a new DOC commissioner pledges transparency. And yet, solitary survives, mutated, renamed, bureaucratized. Because no one has invented a system that manages fear without isolation. Reform becomes rhetoric. Rhetoric becomes inertia. Inertia becomes policy. The city keeps rearranging the architecture of cruelty instead of dismantling it. As one retired warden once said anonymously to the New York Times, "You can't end solitary at Rikers. It's the spine of the institution. Pull it out and the whole thing collapses." Outside Rikers, solitary confinement looks like an anomaly. Inside, it's a continuum, part of the island's circulatory system. It starts with segregation and intake, then cell restriction, then enhanced supervision, then arm. Different names. Same anatomy. The logic persists because the system needs a void, a place to put what it can't process. Every complex society invents one: a pit, a gulag, a room. The Bing is America's. The most haunting outcome of solitary isn't who you become there, it's who you leave behind. You create another version of yourself to survive. The one who doesn't feel, doesn't dream, doesn't react. When you leave, that version doesn't. It waits, silent, at the edge of your sleep. Some call it dissociation. Others call it haunting. Either way, it's permanent. Psychiatrist Dr. Stuart Gracian, in his landmark 1983 study, called it SHU syndrome, a constellation of trauma symptoms so severe they mimic psychosis. Decades later, the term still describes thousands. If you survive long enough, you'll learn the most painful truth: the Bing is a mirror. It reflects everything the city doesn't want to see: poverty, mental illness, racial inequality, administrative neglect, and compresses it into a single, soundproof box. When people talk about closing Rikers, they imagine closing geography. But you can't close an idea. As long as a system requires disappearance to function, there will always be another Bing. In another form, another name, another neighborhood. The room doesn't disappear when the walls come down. It migrates. Let's strip away the policy, the data, the language. What is solitary confinement in essence? It's the state's declaration that it can erase a human being without killing them. The Bing is a moral experiment. How much suffering can be bureaucratized before it becomes invisible? The answer, according to decades of Rikers history, is infinite. Solitary survives because it flatters our illusion of justice, pain disguised as order. It's the quietest kind of cruelty, procedural, polite, permanent. If the Bing had a creed, it would read, "Thou shalt not be remembered." Every institution built on control develops one, a rule that keeps its cruelty efficient. For Rikers, remembrance is risk. Memory threatens the machinery. That's why every manual, every training, every memo is written to manage perception. The less the public imagines, the longer the system endures. That's why you need this survival guide. Because memory is resistance. If you survive the Bing, you become its chronicler. Every person who endured it carries knowledge the system depends on forgetting. How silence feels when weaponized. How isolation corrodes empathy. How bureaucracy disguises violence. To speak of it is to weaken it. Every story retold is another crack in the facade of order. That's the paradox of survival. Your pain becomes the next generation's shield. The Bing can erase individuals, but not the idea that humanity can outlast architecture. You have now completed the survival guide to Rikers Solitary Confinement. But the Bing is not confined to one island. It lives anywhere silence is policy, anywhere isolation is disguised as order. You may never step inside that 8x10 cell, but the walls are closer than you think. Because every system that erases its people eventually forgets its purpose. And when a nation builds rooms meant to contain despair, those rooms never stay empty for long. The search for truth continues.